Hey everyone. Friend of the podcast, Carl Bonner, is a mixing engineer who helps other producers and mixers find, attract, and build better relationships with clients who are making the kind of music you are most passionate about. He recently began developing a course based on how he trains the Spotify algorithm to make super accurate recommendations for you to find potential artists to work with. And he's giving it all away for free while it's still a work in progress. So go to carlbonner.com/coaching to learn more, and I'll have a link for that in the show notes. So go check it out. Hey everyone, welcome back to Secret Sonics. This is episode 133 with Xylo Aria. I had a great chat with Xylo and we talked about so many things, including how a bad experience led her to learn how to produce herself and eventually to form music production for women and teach other women how to produce. We talked about what it was like forming her organization, getting over intimidation at the beginning of learning this craft. We talked about podcasting, delegation, her approach to songwriting and mixing, switching production versus mixing hats. We talked about her approach to space and reverb. We talked about prioritizing performance over sound. And we got into habits, why not to buy too much gear too early on, knowing your own value, and so much more. So I think you're going to love this conversation. So with all that to say, here's my conversation with Xylo Aria here on Secret Sonics. You're listening to Secret Sonics, a podcast exploring the creative side of music production. Join us weekly for honest conversations with real-world music producers and audio professionals. Hello, and welcome back to Secret Sonics. I'm your host, Ben Wallach. My guest today is Xylo Aria. Xylo is a Melbourne, Australia-based music producer, artist, and the founder of Music Production for Women. Named in the top 50 East London Innovators of 2020 and the top 100 She Said So Alt-Power list, Xylo is endlessly committed to improving the gender disparity in music production through positive action. Xylo and I recently connected on Instagram, and I invited her on the podcast, and she's graciously agreed to join me on the air. So with all that to say, welcome to Secret Sonics, Xylo.
Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me, Ben.
Yes, absolutely. So tell the audience a little bit about your story. When did music become important for you? How did it evolve into production? And, obviously starting your organization.
So I guess music, I started as a singer-songwriter, and my first memories of singing, I can't even remember. I think I was very, very young. But I used to be taken to a Indian Carnatic, which is a traditional Indian type of music. My grandma used to take me to her Indian Carnatic singing lessons. So that's kind of where it started for me, I guess. But I was super shy and I hated my voice for a long time. But eventually, after enough people were like, oh, actually, I think, your voice sounds all right. Anyway, I got into singing lessons and worked with my voice a bit more, and then started writing, I think, when I was about 12. Just started making music with a couple of people that started producing at the same time in high school. So I was kind of singing on their tracks and stuff. Yeah, since then, just worked with a number of different producers, all in the kind of down-tempo electronic sort of space.
Seems to be big in Melbourne, right? That seems to be the vibe.
Okay. Oh, maybe. Maybe. I didn't think about that, but yeah. But yeah, so worked with a few producers, and I just kind of never thought that production was something that I could do at all. And I couldn't really work out why. And I did produce a few things for myself on Fruity Loops and I think I used to use Cubase until a certain point. But in my mind, I was like, I'll just start this off and then I'll give it to a real producer. And then unfortunately, the producers that I worked with, it was not the best experience. There was a lot of kind of power games and mind games, and I'm sure any woman listening to this unfortunately knows what I'm talking about. Kind of dealing with that enough times, I was like, you know what, I don't deserve this, and I'm going to start producing for myself so that I can be in control of this and I don't have to deal with this behavior just to be able to do something that I love. So I then started teaching myself to produce music, not because I had any interest in it, but mainly because that was the only thing or the only way out of the situation that I could think of.
I mean, that's amazing that you had the guts to do that. I feel like so many people, in a situation where they feel powerless, just will continue as is and do nothing about it? Like, what gave you the chutzpah, for lack of a better term, to say like, no, I don't need this. Like, I'm going to do this myself. That's badass.
There was I know the exact time, it was the one last meeting that I had with my producer where everything went completely south. And I was like, no, I'm not dealing with this anymore. And it was really sad, I remember. And I think because we had so many songs, we were almost done with an album. And in my mind, I was like, if I walk away right now, that's like a year's worth of stuff that we've done down the drain. But that's why I'd kind of let it go on for so long, because I was like, oh no, like
sunk costs.
Yeah, exactly. Sunk costs. Yeah. But then that day, it was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. And I was like, I don't care. It's just not worth it. So yeah, so I feel like I was talking about this to one of our students earlier who was going through like a bit of a tough time in a different scenario, like with her work and everything was sort of falling apart. But sometimes just looking back to my experiences, I feel like whenever you get to that point where everything's going down the drain, that's what causes you to change something in your life drastically that maybe you wouldn't have before. So in a way now, even though I don't want anyone to go through that experience, but I'm sort of happy because it kind of made me take control and do this myself and made me start the organization that is MPW. Anyway, so eventually I started releasing music that I made myself, and I was like, this is so much better and has given me so much freedom. And I was just thinking any other woman in that position that I was in, I want to make sure that they're not in that and that they have a way out, which is why MPW was started. And it's been about 2.5 years now, and it's grown a lot in that time, which has been really exciting.
What was starting the organization like for you? You had an idea, you started something. Like, what did that look like?
I started actually my career in accounting. So I studied accounting. I started my career in kind of the corporate area. So I feel like there was these two sides of who I was. There was this creative musician, and then there's this person that's really interested in business as well. So I'd kind of been thinking that I really wanted to start a business in something for a while, and I wasn't sure what that was. And I was sitting in this conference once, and the guy who was running it was saying, the best businesses in the world are better at helping someone than anyone else. So he was saying, if you don't have an idea for a business, think about a time where you've needed help and how you've helped yourself out of that situation. And could you do that for someone else? And that was just like this light bulb moment of, oh my God, I know the time where I kind of struggled the most with something that meant so much to me. And I got myself out of that by learning to produce. And can I do this for anyone else? And that was the starting point. I ended up quitting my job and just starting this. That's not how I would recommend anyone to start a business, because it was very, very stressful. But yeah, I guess I just went like all in and then just started building this platform without knowing what that takes at all. Like I did not know how to create a membership portal or create like an education platform or anything like that. I think maybe that's a good thing about ignorance, is that you just, when you don't know what's involved, you don't know how hard it is and you just go for it. So every step there's been a lot of learnings and a lot of time, I guess.
Well, it seems to be doing great. Like you guys, you have a ton of members. Yeah, I don't know exactly how it works, but tons of followers, a podcast, all kinds of stuff going on. I guess it's been like a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. How have you been able to grow? How have you been able to grow the organization?
Yeah, there's been a lot of research, I would say, and one thing about quitting everything else and going into it head first, there's so much pressure to make it work, come what may, that I maybe got everything done in maybe half the time that I would have, or less, if I had a steady income at the time. So there was that. There was a big push for me to actually create strong goals or kind of posts for me to reach every month or every week even, and even further down to every day, because I knew that if I quit everything and I had this huge mountain to climb, then I'd have no idea how to get started or what to do, and just probably sleep all day, because when something seems too big, you don't really know where to start. So before I left, I did kind of map out a plan and set out a month's worth of work pretty much by the day, so that I'd know when I woke up what I needed to do and not get lost in the amount of work there is to do. So yeah, I feel like sometimes I forget actually where we started, but looking back, I guess a lot has happened in that time. Everything is just one step at a time, and we've got a lot more to go as far as where I want to get to, but it's just one step at a time. And that, I love that saying of like, you know, how do you eat an elephant? Just one bite at a time.
Oh, God.
I'm vegetarian, just saying.
Does anybody even eat elephants?
I don't think so, but, you know, just putting it out there.
Yeah, just one bite at a time. Yeah, I mean, I love that. I feel like so many of us who are in this music production creative thing are accidental entrepreneurs. Like, you know, I didn't get into this because I wanted to be a business owner. I got into this because I wanted to make music. But in the end, I had to open a business, right? Sometimes it's very hard to kind of, you know, map out how you're going to do it. And, you know, there are days where it's like, okay, what am I going to do next? What are my goals? It's cool that you were able to kind of, I don't know, prepare this whole like thing to kind of, you know, almost like a business plan, I guess, right? To make it happen.
Yeah.
So your brain works in a good way. Like I don't think everybody's brain works that way.
Yeah, it's funny. Like I've spoken about this before, is where like I feel like I used to hide my business background because I was like, oh no, people will think I'm not a real musician if I have this background or whatever. But I've recently realized that it's a strength of mine, and I need to embrace it, and that it's maybe not so common to find someone with a business and a music background, and to make the most of that, to make MPW, I guess, as well run a business as possible, and to not shy away from that.
Yeah. Amazing. So when you had that moment where you said, "Okay, I'm doing this myself. Like I don't need to deal with this shit." You know, what was available to you then to kind of learn how to get started, and what have you kind of realized you need to provide other people so that they, you know, other non-men or just in general other musicians,
yeah,
how to get started with production? Like it's quite intimidating to you know, to realize how much there is to learn. You know.
Exactly. So yes, there was a lot of intimidation, that's for sure. I guess, you know, I was lucky to have some really good friends that helped break it down for me as well. So there were people that dealt with a lot of my silly questions or whatever, or made time for me at that early stage. And I really, really appreciate that. Of course, there was YouTube, and, you know, there's good and bad things about that. Of course, everything under the sun, all the knowledge that there ever was is pretty much on YouTube. But that is can be a wormhole that you can go down, and sometimes see things that not in the right structure or whatever. And especially when you're starting out, you can feel a bit discouraged by seeing things that are not at the right level for you, and then feeling like, oh my God, this is too much, I'm just going to give up, sort of thing. But I did get a lot from YouTube as well. And then there were a few forums as well. So the Ableton user groups, you know, they're pretty good. So I went to a couple in Melbourne. They are a great resource, but I think especially if you don't know anything about production, which I didn't really, and you rock up to one of these, then it can be a bit intimidating. Also, when you look around and there's no one that looks anything like you, then you just feel like you can't ask any questions that you want to ask, because you'll just maybe immediately be labeled as the silly person who doesn't know what's going on. You know, maybe not. Maybe that's not what anyone would think at all, but that's kind of the thinking that goes on in your head. So, but you know, I stuck with it with these resources anyway, and eventually things started coming together. But from that, like the main three things that I wished were there when I started, that MPW sort of built around, is